Don't translate it. Just leave it alone. Don't try to even find the equivalent. Just leave it alone. You already know what that means. Per varios. No? Well, what is the next word?
Casus.
Casus.
Yeah.
Now there we might have to say, stop. Use your imagination. Don't translate, but ask yourself, what comes to mind? I mean, are there not English words? Turns out that Latin words are like the pebble which is dropped into the still pool. They go out in the English ripples. There are lots of words that come out of casus. And you do have to think a little bit about it. You have to develop a kind of verbal imagination to handle that.
Yeah, and it's a marvelous thing to do.
What a wonderful thing for English. I mean, it enriches your English.
Yeah, you eventually, if you think about casus, you come to the word casualty or to casual, and you begin to get a sense that the word casualty is probably a good one. That is, it really means there must be a closer case in that case.
Actually, case.
I was thinking of something that falls.
But the trouble with case is that we don't know what that means either.
Yeah, we don't know what that means.
There's occasion. It's in the word occasion.
Something that happens. It's something that befalls, or literally that falls. People who behave.
It comes, of course. It is the part of a word. Cadere is the verb, and casus is the participle. And if you once do begin to master a very small vocabulary and get to know how to handle the words, then of course with that you get into cadence and decadence. And, a lot of words.
You have to get the
that fall down. Cadences, especially decay, and. You do have to go back to the verb there, I think, in order to see the root. Although probably not. Probably we're just not being imaginative enough. If you keep thinking of English words, sooner or later you'll come on the perfect one. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Through various falls. That would be a beautiful translation.
They have here they have through divers mishaps. A little more elegant, but. That's right. Divers that's another Latinate word.
When we use the word case, as for example, the detective has a case. Isn't that just what it means? That is something disastrous has happened, and so now you have a case. If you didn't have a case, that would mean that nothing really happened. So it is in the word case. We have in that case. Well, in that case, what do you mean by that? When you say, what's the meaning of that word case? We don't even think about it. We just use it because we know what it means. But it has to do really with something that befell.
Yeah, something that happened. That's why he says mishaps. Mishaps. That's the word.
Well, that's the Anglo-Saxon.
That's the Anglo-Saxon.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's an exact equivalent. That's what you often get. You often find that the Anglo-Saxon, after all, which is Germanic, that it's simply a word that was invented to mean exactly the same thing. It's and that's true of Greek. You often find that there is a Latin word that is the exact equivalent of a Greek word. It has a lot of the same variations in it, the same literal meaning in it, and you find that true, of course, in a great many languages. As a matter of fact,
I can remember in teaching those old Latin classes that sometimes we would spend a whole hour on a single word. That is, other words would come to mind as you kept on talking. You know what just came to mind to me now, which is pretty obvious, from the Psalms, is the word ocasus, which means the west, the setting of the sun. Occidens, the Oriens is the rising of the sun, and Occidens is the setting of the sun, meaning the going down. The falling down of the sun, and the Christ, or in the Psalms, it's the Messiah, or God, walks upon the west. He walks above the west, which is always taken as Christ comes from the east. He is the Orient exalted. He is the rising star of the east. But he walks upon the west, which is the conquest of sin. That is of the fall of the super accustomed. I forget which psalm that is. I've got this little fragment in my head, but what a wonderful thing it was in those glorious days when people did recite the Psalter in Latin day after day after day. So they knew they substantially knew the Psalms by heart. And I don't mean only monks knew the Psalms by heart, but everybody knew them. Even carpenters and ignorant fishermen.
People who were really illiterate, we would say by our own standards, who really couldn't read and write very much, would still know those Psalms because it was primarily an oral kind of education.
I mean, we just seems 100 years ago. Was it just yesterday? When was it? We were at a funeral, and when we heard those words, "Requiem," I mean, it is staggering. It's just, there's no word. Staggering is the wrong word. It's because it's so ordinary. It isn't staggering. It's something very simple and very quiet, and yet everybody knows what those words mean. The word quies is requiem. The word quies, you will find quiet. It says you will go toward Latium where you will find quiet.
It says point out a home of rest.
A home.
Sedes quietas.
Yeah, sedes.
Sedes.
We have Mary is always called Sedes Sapientiae, the seat of wisdom, and of course the Holy See is called the Sedes Apostolica, the Sedes Sancta, and there it is, the seat, the place where you sit down. There will be it's wrong to call it throne, really. It's not. It's a chair. It's a seat. It's a place where you sit. The word sedentary, and I suppose the word seat itself does come from it, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. The Greek word is cathedra.
Yeah,
cathedra. See,
yeah.
You get that in the first Psalms. Yeah. In the Vulgate, they talk about the cathedra of the impious.
Yeah.
Who sit in the seat of the scorners or something of that sort. Actually, I've just come back from Portugal just the other day, and much of what I was doing in teaching people to read the Bible in this kind of patristic way was nothing more than what we are doing right now. That is, and what everyone learned to do in the Middle Ages when they learned the Psalms, when they memorized the Psalms. That is, they had all of these words in their vocabulary, not in their active vocabulary, not that they could speak this way, but that they were in, I suppose, what we'd call their passive vocabulary. They were all there, latent in their memories. And when you used one word in a psalm, it would awaken echoes of the uses of those words in all of the Psalms, and then more widely in all of the Scriptures itself.
And finally, in the world, that is all literature. Because think of the poems again that were written based upon it. That is, you get a whole culture.
Yes, exactly.
You get the Dies Irae, which is not in the Bible, but it still uses exactly the same word. And then finally, you get Shakespeare, who uses the same word.
And your own language, that is your own language, which is going to be, which may well be a Latinate or a Romance language, as we say, is going to have cognates that you will recognize, and those will be in poems. So a whole world comes out of that kind of knowledge.
Without that, you can't have a poetry. Ezra Pound, I think, who was fond of making puns and wild jokes, who talked about this loss of tradition, and Lord knows he was responsible for smashing a great deal of himself. But he said, as a joke, for God's sakes, leave us our illusions. Making a pun on the word illusion and allusion. But what he was explaining is that you cannot write a poem. He was confronting the problem of a poet today. And without this illusory power, a poet really can't write. He can't suggest, because people won't pick up the suggestion. T.S. Eliot felt this so strongly that he had to write footnotes, remember, to his own poem. He wrote all kinds of notes explaining what he meant, because he knew that we wouldn't pick up the illusion. Now, some of them are private, and he went too far perhaps with it. But when a tradition is alive, that kind of reading that you were describing is what we do all the time. And when Winston Churchill stood up and made a speech, that language was in him, and he rolled that out to an audience which understood it. But what we've got now is fragmentary language, the exaggerated form of Time magazine and Newsweek magazine, and they exist in all the European magazines as well. These Express in France, and what is it? I don't know them in German. Stern or something like that, is it? They have these picture magazines, and they're written in little captions. There's no allusion. There's nothing that binds us together. No religion, which is religion. The word means to bind together. So when we recite this line, "For son it take, O limb," and this is Robert, we're not just trying to be affected. We're not just trying to be smart, to appear to be learned, or to give somebody a fake line that he can pull out of his pocket on occasion to impress. We're really just using this one line to suggest something that we hope that each person who hears this will ponder. That is, you have a long life to live. If you could devote some hours of that life to the quiet, slow, childish reading of something in Latin, to try to get back that 12-year-old knowledge, you would do more to rejuvenate, which is to delight yourself. Well, I won't say more than anything else, but almost as much.
Yeah, and it's something you really can't do without. There isn't any substitute for it, and it's hard to go on to anything higher or better if you don't first of all have that kind of ability. You really can't really read the Bible if you're not going to be able to have this experience of poetry and the language of poetry first.
I mean, the whole thing is there. And think where it leads. When you said substitute, I immediately said institute, constitute, restitute, stove, star, exist, existere. I mean, all of those words, that word, that S-T-I-T-S, to stand, to think of the richness of that word, and you get into the whole idea of existence itself. Now, there's no way that you could study St. Thomas Aquinas, for example, without this kind of poetic background. There's a way, and it's a sterile way. It's what destroyed the teaching of St. Thomas in the last generation. That has turned him into a kind of Descartes, and turned him into a manual of, as if he used a scientific language. I remember you were the one who first put me on to the German Thomist talks about that so beautifully.
Pieper.
Joseph Pieper, where he says St. Thomas did not use a scientific vocabulary. He deliberately used different words for the same thing on different occasions. He goes on about that. That is, the modern teachers of St. Thomas acted as if there was a Thomistic jargon, and you could just use the words like counters in a
formula.
And Pieper is very, very good on that. But that has nothing to do with the mind of St. Thomas. And it has nothing to do with the mind of philosophy, or theology.
Now, I was reading someone the other day was writing about St. Thomas, and they were talking about the word arduous, which is always translated as difficult. That is, that there are, I was reading especially about the emotions, that there's a whole set of emotions that have to do with difficult goods or evils to be avoided, goods to be attained. there's a whole that's one classification of the emotions. And what they pointed out was that the word arduous doesn't just mean difficult. That we use the word arduous, we simply mean that comes from the Latin arduum. And they were saying that it also means something that is high or something that is steep.
Cliff, yeah.
It's a cliff, which is difficult, but it's also something high.
Yeah.
So that when he talks about a good, we were talking about hope last time, and that's one of these emotions. That's an emotion about something that's difficult.
It only comes into play when there's a high, steep good.
Yeah. And it's a difficult good, but it's also a high good. Really, it's silly to say, well, we've been having a drought here in Kansas. And you say, well, I have the hope that we will have rain. Well, you say, well, yeah, sure, we use the word that way, but you don't really feel the emotion of hope over a thing like it's very unlikely to happen. That's true. A farmer might. Yeah. But we just say, well, we're just tired of all this dry weather. We like to have the grass turn green, and so we say we hope it rains. But it isn't really a high thing for us. It's just it's an ordinary thing, and it doesn't really deserve the emotion of hope at all. But all I'm trying to illustrate is that that word, as St. Thomas uses it, has that richness about it. It has even what some people would call a kind of ambiguity or a kind of double meaning. It means, on the one hand, it simply means difficult, but it also means something else. It has to do with a certain height.
Well, it's the image really of a climber climbing up a rock face.
Yeah.
You see, that is a cliff.
Well, it used to be used in English that way. Alexander Pope may have been the last person in the English language to use it that way, and he talked about the paths of poetry as being arduous paths. Mm-hmm. Now he meant the high paths of poetry, as well as the difficult paths.
He used the word scaling, the arduous, that is climbing.
Yeah. And you see, that's we say that's poetic now. St. Thomas isn't supposed to be poetic, weeping.
No, but the words are.
But the words are, and he uses them very much the way a poet, or really the way an ordinary person uses language. An ordinary person doesn't use scientific jargon in his ordinary speech, and neither does St. Thomas. But you learn that by reading poetry.
A good book to read. The education people always used to say to us, well, what's a good background book to read on this? And we would always get furious. There isn't any. You have to read the great books themselves. If you want to know what this is like in St. Thomas, you go and read St. Thomas. But I mentioned Joseph Pieper, and he's a man who has a poetic understanding of St. Thomas.
Yes.
And it's a marvelous thing to find in the 20th century. I, of course, was thinking again of John Ruskin. We've mentioned him before when we were talking about Homer. It would be good if you want to do some light reading. That is, when you get through reading the great books themselves. There are some very, very few, but very good commentaries, as it were, written on the great tradition by people who themselves profoundly understood this great tradition. And John Ruskin, the English author, man of letters, he's not an historian, he's not a poet, he's not a scientist, he's not a philosopher. He is a writer of commentaries on the great tradition. That's what he is. He's a civilized commentator. We usually just call them men of letters, literate men. John Ruskin wrote perhaps 100 books, and it wouldn't matter which one you picked up. We recommended on Homer, I think, The Queen of the Air. He wrote a long, rambling series of letters toward the end of his life called Force Clavigira. And the title is in Latin, and the title is enigmatic. And he spends the first of these letters, or the first 3 or 4 of these letters, simply explaining his title, or complexly explaining his title. I thought of it because of the word forson. He has that word F-O-R-S, force. And his title, Force Clavigira, means the force, F-O-R-C-E, the word force, F-O-R-S, means pretty much the same thing as force in the other word, in the English word. The force of the one who carries the keys, or the power of the key bearer. and you say, wow, what a title. What does that mean? And he never explains. I don't think he ever explains that, you know. You have to read the whole book and wonder what he means. Of course, St. Peter is the clavigil. He is the bearer of the keys, the carrier of the keys. But what John Ruskin specifically meant by that is pretty ambiguous. But his commentary on the word force is quite marvelous at the beginning of that book. Because this first word here, forcum, is translated what? Perhaps? Maybe?
Perchance.
Perchance?
You see, there
I was looking at it. Haply, is the way? Haply, perhaps, haply. But the word forcum has within it that word force. That is, it is that's the Latin equivalent of that word erg that we talked about in Plato, which occurs in the word energy and in so many other words. And it means what? Force. Power is not quite the right translation because power implies potency. That is, power implies something latent rather than active. But the word erg or force is something actually there. That is, it's a force right here and now. It isn't something simply potential. As a stick of dynamite is not a force. It's a power, but it's not a force. Whereas this word force means that very energy which includes both potential and actual. I think it's the general term which includes both those aspects. And he's starting out with this sort of explosive word, forcum. And you could translate it explosively like something like, what are you fellows all crying about? What are you all lying there bewailing your fate? Forcum. There is a powerful urge, an erg, an explosive power in that very first word, and we translate it sort of weakly, I'm afraid, by the word probably or maybe, which seems to us, while it's an ordinary word, it should be a very strong word. Now, this may recall us to our own language. The word perhaps is a lot stronger than we usually use it, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, hap is a very powerful word too, and we ought to know that. But that's what that's really what it means here. Forcum, in the working out of the energy of things. Forcum et. Now, the word et is a short form of the Latin word etiam, and it means, usually it's translated also. Also, in addition. It's an word. It's one of the most important words in the language.
Well, they translate it often here. They translate it as even.
Even so. Yeah.
Perhaps even. This district.
Yeah. Even. Yeah. That may be better than also.
Yeah.
When you look it up in this, when you look it up in the dictionary, you get a whole lot of little words.
Yeah. And even will be in there.
And it'll. You can't look it up in a dictionary. It wipes it out. There are too many shades of meaning.
See, the word even is one of those words that stress. I mean, it stresses something.
Mm-hmm.
Even this.
Yeah. Et haec, and haec means this or these things. Even these things. So that's a better translation. Also these things. The forcum et haec. The line, of course, also has a breath to it. It has a meter, a beat. And it's like going off a springboard. Forcum et haec. Oh, and you leap into the air, and at that moment there's a kind of silence until you come down on the word reminiscent.
Well, all of those words are building up. They're little words. They are all full of meaning, although it's a meaning that is not very definite. It's hard to get hold of these little words. They keep you back from the meaning. Yeah, you still haven't got to the meaning at all. Perhaps Forsan, even these things, and then Olim means one day or someday or something like that, and you're still waiting to find out what's he going to say. predicate,
Yeah.
you say, predicate.
So it's very much like a broad jump. I said springboard, but you remember when you were a little kid, you used to do the broad jump, and you know you're going to have to leap from that line, and then your stride isn't right, so you start taking those little short steps, and then you have to jump. And that's what he's doing here. Forsan et Olim. And then you hit the menace, you lob it. That's really, the more you think about that line, you realize what a poet this man is. That he's able to. You can talk about this all day and find more and more effect in it. Let's say that the kind of simplicity that this line represents is not the simplicity of spontaneity. It's arduous. This is an arduous simplicity. Not that the spontaneous may be better. I don't mean to.
No, we don't want to say that it lacks spontaneity. Or I see what you're saying.
Well, and I don't want to say that Homer was lazy and didn't know how to write a line. But there are two different kinds of poetry. The one is simple to begin with, really by a kind of instinct, and the other one is simple by achievement.
Yeah.
And Virgil is the more complex.
Well, that's what
civilized.
That's what you say about Shakespeare. Is that Shakespeare is capable of enormous simplicity, but it's natural. He comes upon it almost by accident, perhaps by chance. He simply comes across.
Well, John Milton has that line which is always criticized. I've always seen footnotes that say, "Well, John Milton didn't understand Shakespeare." But piping his native wood notes.
Wow. Yeah.
And that's always ridiculed, as if John Milton didn't know what he was talking about. But John Milton is much more like Virgil.
Yes.
That is, he is an extremely sophisticated and studied poet. And when he looked at Shakespeare, he just threw up his hands and admitted his greatness. I mean, he says, who could be like this great man?
He is a monument. You are a monument to yourself.
Yeah.
He says you can't build a monument. Well, he's the one. First of all, I suppose, who suggested the idea that Shakespeare is the child of nature, and that idea has been ridiculed.
It's been ridiculed, but I think it's true.
But it's true. It's basically true. People have written long books to try to prove. There was an enormous book written called Shakespeare's Little Latin and Less Greek. See, because Shakespeare's friend Ben Jonson.
He's another one who pointed that out.
He said that he was really the first one. He's before Milton.
Johnson and Milton, of course, didn't understand Shakespeare, but we do. What nonsense?
Yeah. But Ben Jonson said he stressed that idea that he didn't know much Latin, he didn't know much Greek. Everything came to him naturally. And as I say, there's this big, enormous tome trying to prove how much Latin and Greek Shakespeare really had, and indeed, compared to what we have, it was quite a bit.
Well, but what does he prove? Again, now, let me just stop for a minute on that book. You know what he proves? He proves that Shakespeare had exactly that kind of knowledge of Latin that we were talking about.
Yes, it was a schoolboy's
knowledge. And it was a rich knowledge of Latin, but it was all got in a Stratford public school where they memorized Willie's grammar, which was just memory, just pure memory, and they memorized a lot of stuff, Cato's distichs, and this I can't remember his name. This professor, he was from Illinois. I think.
The one who did Baldwin.
Is that it? Was
T.W. Baldwin.
Was T.W. Baldwin?
Yeah. I think it was. No, wait a minute.
No,
maybe it was.
Well, I can't remember. but it's kind of a marvelous book because he doesn't prove what he set out to prove, but he proves something else quite marvelous.
Yeah, he's talking about the education of the day.
Exactly.
And he shows that it was a marvelously rich Latin culture. And you see Milton, by the time Milton went to school, he went to St. Paul's School. And boy, that was a lot more serious. I mean,
you studied Hebrew at 12.
You studied Hebrew, and he was able to compose really rather remarkable Latin poems and Greek poems.
But it was studied,
right? But it was not studied. It was not this natural kind of oral, colloquial kind of Latin that Shakespeare learned. And Shakespeare probably, if you'd have gone to Shakespeare and said, well, now could you recite, one of Horace's odes, he'd have just laughed at you. He'd have said, "Well, no, I can't do that. I've read them, but I couldn't recite them."
He passed an examination translating a few lines, but he couldn't read Horace, whereas Milton could.
Oh, yes.
But Milton was learned, and it was an elite that could do this.
And he was very close to Virgil. Milton had a very, very great place in his heart for Virgil.
But Shakespeare, being the natural, had a natural knowledge of his own culture, which was a Latin culture, and still a Catholic. It's still essentially a Catholic culture. And the bells still rang, and the songs were still sung. It's quite funny that even in the King James translation, they give the titles, not the titles, but the first lines. That is, they identify the songs by their Latin first two words.
That's
first
what
two or three
everyone
words.
remembered them by, yeah.
Just as they call Pater Noster would be the Our Father, but then they insisted that everybody read it in English.
Yeah.
Well, for song and hate. The word hate, we would like to have another hour, but we've got only a few minutes.
Oh, we've got a little more time. That's fair amount of time.
Really, what we've been doing, rambling again, as we do during this hour, we've really been backing up and circling around and going forward and sideways around the words of this one line. We're trying to comment on this one line. Fourth song. Now, if you want to understand fourth song, read some John Ruskin, I think, and especially those letters, the first few letters of this book called Force Claviger. Oh, I don't advise anybody to read the whole book. I've never done it myself. Have you?
Long, very dense.
I've never.
No.
I mean, they go on and on and on.
2 volumes.
Yeah, right. But I've read in it again and at it, and it's a rich and marvelous commentary, essentially, on. Well, I guess we have to say not so much a commentary on our culture as a commentary on the loss of our culture. It was written at the end of the 19th century to the working men of England. And he was explaining that the problems that Karl Marx, I don't know if he mentions Karl Marx, but they're the same problems that Karl Marx had attacked. That is unemployment in the factory system and the economic disasters that came upon an industrialized society, all of that stuff. He was addressing the working men of England on those problems, and his response was exactly the opposite of Karl Marx's. And what Ruskin says is, you've got to go back. You've got to go back to your roots. You've got to go back to work. See, and he got on to the meaning of work. And I think, as we pointed out, irk, is the same word as erg. It's the Anglo-Saxon equivalent of that word erg, and it's the same word as horse. And he got into this idea that a blacksmith is a mighty man whose arm pounds the iron and makes the horseshoe, or makes the armor, or makes the spoon, and that is the force that is at the I can't say the root. Oh, why not? The root of our economic life. There's no harm in saying root, because the force is in the roots too. I mean, it's in vegetables. So that's all in that word force on. Although what it means here is something like, perhaps.
Yes, the word fortune also comes from this word force. It's a strange word.
Fort, like a military fort.
Strong.
And fortune.
Yeah, but fortuna also. That is. Or we were talking last time about destiny. That is, who knows? This has that kind of prophetic character about it. That who knows? But one day, perhaps, the poets don't speak declaratively. As a rule, they don't say, "Well, this is going to happen." They say very often, "Perhaps one day this will happen." It's that mood of consideration of what may come about in future times. It's that note again of hope, but also a realization that we don't really know. We don't know what lies ahead of us, but perhaps this may happen. The word "happen" that's a good translation hap is the English or the Germanic word that is used for fortune.
For what happened.
What happens? What just happens? We can't really control what just happens. We don't know what's going to happen. Things fall out, we say, by happenstance. By chance is another word. Perchance is another word that they use to translate that word with forsound. But he gets up to we haven't. Olim is another word that's like that. Someday.
That's a time word.
Time word. It has to do with what we say. It doesn't have the word day in it at all. Sometime it designates some sort of time. But it's not exactly and entirely in the future necessarily.
Well, we say time is made up of the past, the present, and the future. This word is another dimension. It includes the past and the future, but not the present, I think. Now, some people go too far. They say, well, then it means eternity. No, it's a time word. It's not an eternity. We get into the distinction between time and eternity. There's past and present and future, and then there is eternal life, which is no time at all, which is totally outside of time. But Olam is in time, and again, it's a vague word. It's a suggestive word. It's like perhaps.
Yeah, it's tentative.
The best translation is once upon a time. That's of course, Olam is the beginning of all fairy tales. That is in the medieval versions of the fairy tales. And after all of our fairy tales, like especially Grimm's and even Andersen's, although Andersen didn't make them up, he based them upon stories that he heard from his grandmother. All those old stories go back at least to the tradition of the Middle Ages, and almost all of them begin Olam era agricola. Olam era.
Once there was a farmer. Once there was this. Once.
Once, and you say, well, when is that? Well, long ago and far away, but not just long ago, but also far away, and it can be in the future. Somebody wrote a book about King Arthur. Once and Future King.
Once and Future King. Well, that's a translation of the from the tombstone of Arthur in the legend of Arthur. That he will be the once and future.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Yeah, he didn't make that up. He got that.
White is not that good.
No, he got it.
Because once and future is almost exactly over.
I can't remember what all the Latin was, because it is in Latin.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be on the tombstone of Arthur. It's a prophecy of the return of Arthur. He was once the king, and he will again.
He will come again. So the combination of those two is the dimension of the fairy tale. That is, once upon a time, there was a farmer who lived at the edge of the forest. Well, when is once upon a time?
Well, see, it doesn't have to be restricted to the past.
I mean, the little child can go into it now. I mean, it's any time. It's all time. It's a terrible mistake to think that it was the past. As a matter of fact, the distinction between the tale and the novel is almost to be found directly in pick up any novel, any really classic novel. Pick up Robinson Crusoe, and it starts in the year 18, or well, with him it would have been 17.
Yeah.
In the year 1740. Sometimes they leave it blank because they don't want to fix it. But novels begin with specific dates in history. The tales begin once upon a time, and they're always a little bit. They're not now. I do want to insist that they're not contemporaneous. There's always far away about
it. No, they're far away.
They're far away.
They're
But they can be far away in the future, or they can be far away in the past.
Well, they often include things that we associate with the past, but that's not their fault. That is, they're. I suppose you'd say they tend to they talk about things that are perennial rather than things that are fixed in time. That is, the farmer is always there, and he always lives by the side of the forest, and he always goes about doing the things that a farmer does.
And he always will.
And he always will. That's what the farming life is. And if you go off into the woods, you're liable to get lost. If you're Hansel and Gretel, and you go off into the woods, you're a little boy and girl, well, you get lost in the woods, and you're liable to run across something very strange there in the woods. Sometimes very wicked people live in the woods. It isn't a place where people live, as a rule. You'd say, well, these are things that have always been true. It's always been like this. And it always will be like this.
And what we're living through now will not always be.
No.
There is that. That's true, isn't it? That is, today's newspaper will be dead as a doornail.
No, it's specifically about those things which are not perennial, which don't have any staying power or quality.
We always used to point out that the newspaper people in the old days, I don't know if they still do, but they used to refer to the files as the morgue. That is the old newspapers that the journal keeps on file. The New York Times has a whole stack of a whole file of their former newspapers, and they call that the morgue. They say you go down into the morgue and you can look that up. You can get the 1928 New York Times, March 17th or something. That's the morgue. Today we have the morgue on microfilm, which is the same thing. The library is the mausoleum.
Yeah.
It surely is. It surely is. But once upon a time is alive.
Well, the memory, which is the next word in the passage, that's the key word. That's the turning point of that line, the reminiscence. We remember things. Our memories have to do with, I think we said before, with not only with the past but also with the future as well. Our memories have to do; they're very closely related to our imagination, and so our memories, oddly enough, we think of them as only being associated with the past, but that's a recent idea. You're surprised when you read St. Augustine, who regards the memory as having to do with the future and with the past. The memory looks backward and it looks forward, too. It lives in that dimension of Olim. And that's pretty much the way we've been talking about this, isn't it? All we've been doing here is allowing our memories to wander. Remembering stories, remembering words, remembering other poems, remembering things we've read, and relating them somehow to this passage. And that's of course what we invite you to do. That is that any reader of this poem should. What we're trying to do is not that you will remember the stories we tell necessarily, or the things that we say so much as that you'll develop the knack or the habit of doing the same thing yourself when you read.
And remembering means imagining. And I know when we say that to people, they're usually incredulous. I can remember the future. What's that? But what about a word like apprehension? We use that English word, don't we, to mean the future? That is, we say, I was apprehensive.
Yeah, you're anticipating something that you fear. That's right.
That's perfectly. I mean, we don't have to get mystical about it.
No.
It doesn't. I mean, it's a perfectly ordinary thing. Now, prophecy can come into this and can be a grace which is given. But even so, it's a grace given to nature, and and Virgil, operating in the course of nature here, insists that the terrible things are those which one day we will apprehend, not with delight.